Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Iraq, security forces have shot dead 4 protesters and wounded 20 others during clashes in Baghdad and Nasiriyah. Demonstrators are demanding a complete overhaul of the political system they blame for corruption and unemployment. Clashes broke out when authorities began to remove concrete barriers erected for months near Tahrir Square. This came a day after top cleric Muqtada Sadr withdrew his support for the anti-government campaign. Meanwhile, police in Basra raided a sit-in and attempted to clear a protest camp. 16 protesters were arrested during the raid. After attacks on Iraq this month by the US and Iran, Pope Francis has said Baghdad's sovereignty must be respected. The Pope and Iraq's President Barham Salih agreed on this during a meeting at the Vatican. Salih held private talks with the Pope and also met the Vatican's top diplomats. The talks focused on Iraq's challenges and the importance of promoting stability and reconstruction. The Vatican said both the leaders also discussed the importance of preserving the historical presence of Christians in Iraq. The Pope also expressed his wish to visit Iraq later this year. A 21-year-old woman has been wounded in unprovoked Indian fighting in the Chirikot sector of the line of control. Pakistan military's media wing says Indian forces are deliberately targeting civilians along the LOC. Last week, a 36-year-old woman was injured in unprovoked Indian fighting in the Kotkotera sector of the line of control. Pakistan has time and again asked India to respect the 2003 ceasefire agreement. But ceasefire violations by Indian forces continue unabated. Tensions between India and Pakistan increased after New Delhi stripped occupied Kashmir of its autonomy in August last year. In India, Rajasthan has become the third state to pass a resolution against the Citizenship Act as protests against the disputed law continue across the country. Lawmakers urge the federal government to repeal the law, which is being seen as discriminatory and anti-Muslim. The Kerala and Punjab assemblies have already passed resolutions against the legislation. In Goa, thousands of protesters came out on the streets to protest against the controversial law. This was the first demonstration backed and organized by the Goa Church. Protesters shouted slogans and displayed placards against the ruling BJP. Similar protests were held in Amritsar, Chennai and Mumbai. Meanwhile, police registered a case against student leader Shajil Imam over remarks calling for Assam's secession from India. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the world is now acknowledging the fascist ideology being imposed in occupied Kashmir and India. New Delhi has clamped down the valley for the last 174 days, leading to a severe humanitarian crisis. In his recent tweet, Khan said the anti-democratic policies of Prime Minister Narendra Modi are the biggest threat to the regional peace. He said 8 million Kashmiris and Muslims in India are suffering due to Modi's fascism. Khan shared an article published by the world-renowned publication The Economist on India's intolerance and how Modi is endangering the country's democracy. Government forces have killed 7 Taliban fighters in the country's eastern Ghazni province. In a statement, the Afghan army said the conflict happened in the Andhar district's Nane village. It said 2 fighters were wounded in the clashes. Security forces said they will continue chasing the Taliban elsewhere in the restive province. The Taliban have not yet commented on the incident. The US has appreciated steps taken by Pakistan for the Afghan peace process. In a briefing in Washington, US Envoy for South Asian Affairs Alice Wells said Islamabad has important leverage to promote lasting security and stability in Afghanistan. She said the meeting between President Donald Trump and Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan in Davos shows progress in bilateral ties. Wells said during her visit to Pakistan, she held extensive conversations with the country's leadership on bolstering economic partnership. She also praised Islamabad's efforts to meet its counterterrorism financing obligations under the Financial Action Task Force. China's President Xi Jinping has warned that the spread of the deadly coronavirus is accelerating. Addressing a special meeting in Beijing, the president hoped the country could win the battle against the epidemic. The coronavirus has killed 41 people and infected almost 1,300 since its discovery in Wuhan in December. Travel restrictions have already been hitting several affected cities. Health authorities around the world are taking action to prevent a global pandemic as the virus continues to spread. Cases have been reported in Australia, France, the US, and 7 Asian countries besides China. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has declared an emergency over the coronavirus outbreak in Asian financial hub. She announced a host of measures to limit the city's links with mainland China. Lam said all the official visits to the mainland and the official Lunar New Year celebrations would be scrapped immediately. She said schools will remain shut until February 17th due to the Lunar New Year holidays. Flights and high-speed rail trips between Hong Kong and Wuhan will also be halted. In Myanmar, 2 women, one of whom was pregnant, have been killed and 7 others wounded after the army shelled a Rohingya village in Rakhine State. The attack comes 2 days after the International Court of Justice ordered the country to protect the minority Muslim group. Anti-government politicians said shells fired by a nearby battalion hit the village of Kin Tong in the middle of the night. They claimed there was no fighting and the army simply fired artillery at the village. Almost 750,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to Bangladesh after a military massacre in 2017. 22 people have been killed after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake jolted eastern Turkey. Local authorities say over 1,000 people were injured. Officials say the quake's epicenter in the Elazig province at a depth of 6.7 kilometers. They say search and rescue operation has begun and the death toll could rise. Hundreds of residents are left homeless or with damaged homes. The Turkish Red Crescent has set up a crisis desk in Ankara. The earthquake was felt in neighboring provinces as well as in Syria, Iran, and Lebanon. World leaders, including Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and Canada's Premier Justin Trudeau, have sent their condolences. In Nepal, a South Korean rescue team has suspended the search operation for missing trackers due to adverse weather. 4 South Korean trackers and 3 Nepali guides are trapped in Mount Annapurna region. Rescuers began digging through several feet of snow at 2 mountainside locations in Nepal. Rescue officials said they are continuously making a search plan with the local teams. The hikers have been missing since 17th of January after being swept away by an avalanche. In the U.S., 2 people have been killed in a shooting at a cigar lounge outside Chicago. Police said several others have been wounded. Authorities said the shooting happened at a lounge in Lizzle, 40 kilometers west of downtown Chicago. They said the female shooter shot 3 men before turning the gun on herself. The woman and one of the men died at the scene, while the 2 wounded were sent to the local hospitals. Police said the incident is now under investigation. In Somalia, 2 soldiers have been killed and 6 others wounded after a military vehicle was targeted in a roadside bombing in Shabelle region. Meanwhile, 3 children died of hunger in Mogadishu's internally displaced persons camps. Police said the vehicle was traveling from Johar to Balad district. They added the wounded soldiers were airlifted to Balad district hospital. No group has yet claimed the responsibility for the attack. In another development, hunger and poor housing conditions claimed the lives of 3 children living in the IDP camps. People living in the camps have sought help from the government and the humanitarian agencies. It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In Libya, oil production has fallen by around 3/4 since a blockade of key operations began last week. The country is now producing nearly 300,000 barrels a day compared to 1.2 million before the 18th of January. The national oil company said the output cut has resulted in an estimated loss of $256 million. since the closure of major oil fields and ports in the east and south of the country by forces loyal to warlord Khalifa Haftar. Libya's internationally recognized government has been battling Haftar's forces since late April to repulse the Tripoli offensive. World powers have stepped up efforts in recent weeks to find a political solution, but a ceasefire deal brokered by Russia and Turkey is yet to take effect. The country is plagued in a civil war since the ouster of longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Sudan's ruling council and a rebel group have signed a preliminary deal on political and security arrangements. Officials say the pact attempts to integrate anti-government militias into the army to produce a single national military. The deal grants special status to two regions that are now partly under rebel control. South Kordofan and Blue Nile will be able to write their own laws. Government representatives signed the agreement with the People's Liberation Movement at a ceremony overseen by South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. The ruling council and rebel groups restarted peace talks last October to end the years-long conflict. A transitional government was put in place following the fall of the veteran autocrat Omar al-Bashir last year. Bulgaria has expelled two Russian diplomats over spying allegations and gives them 48 hours to leave the Balkan country. Foreign Minister Katerina Zahareva said the government has received the letters from the prosecutors with the allegations. The foreign minister said that they will undertake necessary actions and summon the Russian ambassador. The Russian embassy in Sofia said Moscow reserved the right to respond to Bulgaria for the expulsion of the two diplomats. Poland's President Andrzej Duda says he boycotted this year's Auschwitz Remembrance event as he was not allowed to speak at the ceremony. On 23rd of January, Israel hosted over 45 world leaders in Jerusalem to mark 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. President Duda said he turned down his invitation to the conference. He was outraged as representatives of other countries were allowed to speak, but not him. Earlier, he had said he would boycott the event if he was not able to present the Polish point of view. He was referring to the country's 6 million citizens who perished in the Second World War, 3 million of whom were Jews. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has signed the Brexit withdrawal agreement at Downing Street, London. The bill will take the UK out of the European Union on 31st of January. It's a process that has taken two Conservative governments under two different Prime Ministers and over a year to pass in the Parliament. Johnson said finally delivering the result of the 2016 referendum was a great moment for the country. The Prime Minister said he hoped it will bring an end to years of arguments and division. Earlier, EU leaders signed the document in Brussels before it was transported to London by train. The European Parliament will vote on the agreement on 29th of January. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said he is optimistic about the potential for a trade deal between Washington and London. At an event in London, Mnuchin said efforts are being made to formalize a trade deal between the two allies. He said the trade deals with the EU and the UK are taking center stage after the US struck the initial trade accord with China. Mnuchin said Britain may need to finalize some issues with the EU before it could discuss them with Washington. War-struck Yemen is now struggling with a dengue outbreak. The disease has infected hundreds of children as the ongoing war impedes efforts to fight the world's fastest spreading virus. The World Health Organization has also shown concerns over the spread of the disease. Here are the details.
In crowded hospitals, an unhygienic atmosphere only increases the problems faced by Yemen's children. Workers are struggling to clean an insect-filled pool of stagnant rainwater gathering in the battered port city of Hodeidah.
Dengue has been spreading fast these days, and when you have not 1, 2, 3, but 4 patients, where can you go? The private hospitals are very expensive and we can't afford it.
The World Health Organization says dengue is one of the world's top 10 public health threats.
Well, in 2019, there was more than 76,000 2,000 suspected cases of dengue across Yemen, with 271 associated deaths. When it comes to areas that are most affected, the governorate of Hodeidah has been seeing, for example, 70% of all alerts end of 2019. So this is the area that is the most affected, and at the same time it's an area of active fighting.
An aid organisation claims they are receiving reports of deaths on a daily basis from remote areas. Local authorities say they are struggling to control the outbreak of the disease.
The measures that were taken are to fill all the swamps in cooperation with the local authorities. Yesterday and the day before in Hodeidah, the cases have decreased in the countryside and we have filled up and closed the majority of the swamps.
There is no specific treatment and no widely available vaccine for dengue. Yemen's civil war, now in its 5th year, has killed over 100,000 people. The United Nations has described the country's situation as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. Welcome back. In China, Lunar New Year celebrations have been subdued by the coronavirus outbreak, but some have still managed to revel in the festivities in Beijing. The 2020 Spring Festival Gala was staged to selected audience and broadcast globally. Here are the details.
China is marking the new lunar year, one of the most important dates in its calendar. This is the time of the year dedicated to cultural celebrations and family reunions. But this year, it's different, as concerns grow about the coronavirus outbreak. However, a state media group in Beijing managed to host a festive gala to selected audiences. The Spring Gala Festival featured a mix of comedy acts, songs, acrobatic performances, and magic shows. Wearing colorful dresses, Chinese characters greeted New Year to all those watching the live broadcast at home. The performances also focused on the country's ongoing battle against the epidemic. Similar celebrations were held in Zhengzhou City in central China's Henan Province and Greater Bay.
In Nicaragua, beekeeping is a highly lucrative alternative for small-scale farmers, but climate change is affecting their business. One local beekeeper has turned to raising queen bees to improve the quality and the production of his honey. More in this report.
Climate change is rapidly affecting daily life and habitats around the globe. In Nicaragua, beekeeping is considered one of the most profitable businesses. The country exports 442 tons of natural honey to the world. But beekeepers say the changing climate is bad for honey production.
We have an average production between 35 to 40 kilograms per beehive per year, but we have been affected by climate change and it has considerably decreased production, such as producing up to 15 kilograms per beehive per year.
Incluso hemos tenido producciones de hasta 15.
A local beekeeper, Santos Flores, has found that raising queen bees is the solution to the problem.
Y eso lo logramos
Every year we gradually increase by 80 to 90% and we achieve this through beehive divisions. We have also activities such as natural queen breeding and artificial queen breeding.
Santos Flores says that working more technically is giving better production.
This allows us, as we have said before, to obtain a better production, because I no longer have to wait a month so that the queen bee can lay an egg. Here, I'll only have to wait 8 to 9 days, which is valuable time, relatively speaking.
Beekeepers believe the solution to their problem lies in innovation. As climate change progresses, those who remain dependent on traditional methods will be left behind.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now for the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus News.